So you're trying to build a web API in Python. Perfect. But maybe you're just starting out, or maybe you've wrestled with other frameworks like Flask or Django and thought there has to be a better way. Well, you just found it in this video. If you think building a fast, powerful, production-ready API sounds complicated, you haven't met FastAPI yet. So if you give me the next few minutes, we're going to pull back the curtain and build something like this. Basically a student database or a database API with FastAPI. We'll go from total empty folder, everything from the ground up, to a working API with a basic overview of what happens inside of a FastAPI, and then go to a more complex version, which is what you see on screen here. And we'll do this all inside of this video. We won't use a database here, but that's going to be coming in a later video, but I want to make this as beginner friendly as possible. So without further ado, let's get into some code. Okay, so what you can see on screen right now is that I've gone ahead and taken the liberty of creating a new project, and I've also gone ahead and added FastAPI inside of this project. To do that, what you want to do is use UV. If you don't already have UV installed, use the documentation that is linked in the description below. You can use UV add FastAPI standard, and that should be inside of quotes. If you don't have it in quotes, you will get an error, but as long as you have it in quotes, you should be fine. When you do that, you will then be greeted with this information here. It's going to create a VN or virtual environment for you, and then install all of its dependencies that it needs to actually work. After that, you'll want to go ahead and do source vn then activate. If you're on a Mac or Linux machine, it will be slightly different on a Windows machine, but the command will be similar, and I'll leave that down inside of the description as well for those that are on a Windows machine. When that actually finishes, you will get this guy right here on the left side, and that will tell you or signify to you that everything is running as it should, and we can go ahead and get started. Okay, so we start, or at least at this point, we start with the bare bones of what UV created inside of the creation of this project. And again, it's just a print main function that shows that we actually have some code that should be working. To get started with FastAPI though, what we will want to do is import that inside of our main.py. So that's what I'm going to do here. I'm just going to grab that, delete all of this here. I'll bring this up so you guys can see that, hopefully. And first things first, what we're going to want to do is import. Well, before we get into that, I'm going to demonstrate what we're going to actually cover inside of this example here. So I'm going to put this inside of a doc string really quick, and we're going to do these 6 or so things just to get a feel of what FastAPI can really do and the power that it has to actually create something really fast. So we're obviously going to create our FastAPI app. Then we'll get started with our get requests, a post request, a put request, and then a delete. This is basically the CRUD or CRUD, as it were, inside of a real API. This is a very trivial example to get started with, but this is going to show us the power of actually using FastAPI. So we'll go ahead and say from FastAPI, insert from FastAPI. Cursor is going crazy right now. I don't need all of that. So we'll say from FastAPI, import FastAPI. We'll also use Pydantic to understand what is going on inside of our code, or specifically inside of the data that we're expecting for the API to spit out back to us. So we'll use that and say from Pydantic, import the base model. Again, cursor's going crazy. And we will need, for this example, we're going to need a list. So we'll say from typing import list, and we'll say import UVcorn. Okay. So there are a bunch of different ways to create a FastAPI application. This is the way that I've always done it. So we'll just go with this. Obviously, the step one is to create our app. So we'll say FastAPI API here. We could leave this just like this with nothing else inside of it. But if we want to give the documentation a little bit more robustness, we can go inside of this object or inside of this class and say we want to give this a title. And here we'll say fast student API beginner. Sure. I guess we can spell the whole thing out. The description, then we'll go underneath that and we'll say description one time where this is actually doing what I want it to do. A simple API for man student. Cool. Okay. So usually, or technically, we could get started with just doing a creation of the endpoints. So to do that, I'm just going to create a home route for this. So we'll say at app.get and slash is, and this is basically going to be the home place or the home base for this this API. So whenever anyone goes to localhost 8000, that's going to be the landing page or landing portion of our API. So anytime that someone visits that particular thing, what we're going to do here, and I'm going to put this inside of a document string as well. This will be the home page of our API. And to give ourselves, our future selves, something to go on here, we'll say, actually, let me back up. This is going to need to be inside of a def. So we'll say here. Okay, there we go. We'll say this is the home route. So home route, the home page for our API. Visit HTTP localhost 8000 to get here. And inside of this, I'm just going to copy this over. This is going to just create a return. So because this is pretty much straightforward, I'm just going to put this in here and copy this over from my example. We're going to create this and say this is going to return a message. Welcome to the student API. This is going to also give the user a tip. Go to docs to see all the endpoints. The tip is going to be for us later. Endpoints will be get all students at student, get one student at students with an ID, get a student or add a student, I should say, with students, and then post, and that's going to actually send some information. Then we want to update a student, so student ID with a pull request, and then delete a student's ID with a delete. Okay. Now, there are some things that we're going to do inside of this situation that we'll revisit later on. And the one thing that I'm going to talk about is a global variable that's going to be used inside this project. Technically, you don't want to do that in a production type of setting, and I'll tell you about that in a second. But before we actually create any of the other routes, what we're going to want to do is create the student model. So we'll say class student base model, which is coming from, by the way, being imported up here from Pydantic. And inside this base model, again, I'm going to add a doc string, and I'll just copy this over just to save some time because this is already going to be a pretty lengthy video. So now that we have that, we're going to now create our student database or student DB with some dummy data here. So name of Alice, Bob, and Charlie, age 16, 17, and 15, grade 10th, 11th, and 9th. This technically, and I'm going to put this inside of a comment up here. Technically, this is going to be something that we don't want to do. Obviously, we're going to, in a real production setting, you would want to put this obviously inside of a real Postgres database or some type of database. It doesn't have to be Postgres, but you also, something that we want to touch on right now, just so when we come back to it later, really don't want to do a global variable like this in a real production setting, because it, especially if it's mutable like it is right here, because there are some caveats that could come with this. In particular, if you try to delete one of these, so say if you deleted Alice, for example, and then if you, especially if the because of the way that FastAPI kind of works, especially if you are using multiple workers, and what that means is multiple Python brains, so to speak, inside of one API project or run, this could become a little catastrophic in the way of, it will probably, or could, if you were trying to delete something, it could still show back up if you were doing this multiple different times. But that's a little bit down the road. Let's now go ahead and create our student database, or our students route, I should say. So to get started with that, we'll say at app.get/student. And this is going to just have this guy here. Again, because this is pretty straightforward, I'm going to go ahead and copy this over from my example. And what this is going to do, I'm going to have to bring this back a little bit. What this is going to do is return all the students that we have currently inside of students DB, and then students obviously individually will see that information for each of the students that we have up here. The next thing that we want to do, and to save a little bit of time, I'm going to bring this over and then just start talking about it, because it's pretty much the same stuff that we do here, just down in different formats. So we'll say here, we'll go ahead and copy that in and say, hey, I want to get, or again, I want to get the students, but specifically, I want to get the students by their ID. Now, what we created up here is that guy right up here. So ID 1, 2, and 3. So when we want to single out a specific portion of our data, we want to then say, this is a parameter that I want to abide by when I go and grab this information from the API. When I do that, it's going to call this function and then pass student ID into this function, which is going to, at this point, be an integer. What this is going to do, obviously, get one specific student, but based on their ID, the student ID comes from the URL path, which is coming from up here. And the example that is going to be given here is /students1. So anytime that we go to /students1, that then is going to give us the ID, in this case right here, of Alice. When we do that, we want to go inside and create a for loop that is going to cycle through all of our student data and then say, for every student that we have inside of students DB, if we have a student with the ID that is equal to the student ID that we have here, then return that student. When we get that, or if we, when we actually get that information, what it should return back to us is a student. Okay, so we have some endpoints that we can actually test here. Let's go ahead and test to make sure that these are actually working. And by the way, if this does not get found, or if this student ID is not found, what we will then do is then return an error. Okay. What we want to do now is go ahead, and there's a few different ways to actually get the FastAPI to actually work. There's a few different ways that we can actually get a FastAPI to actually work. One of those ways is by using UVcorn specifically. So we'll say UVcorn. This is going to be main.py. Main app. Main : app. Now we can do this just by going with this command here. We can say UVcorn main app. That should then, oh yeah, don't forget to save your work, kids. All right, so now if we go ahead and do UVcorn main app again, that should now give me this guy right here. So HTTP 127.0.0.1, which is localhost basically. And I'm going to go ahead and open this in my browser. I'm going to refresh. So this is going to grab all the stuff that we were doing before. And now we have our home, our students, and document, or students at student ID. But obviously, this is not exactly where we should be landing specifically. So what I'll do is go here, and this will, again, HTTP 127.0.0.8000 or port 8000. This is our welcome message, the same welcome message that we created over here. So message, welcome to the student API. Tip, go to the docs to see all the endpoints, and then the specific endpoints that we have or will have inside of this project. So here basically is exactly what we should be looking, or what we were trying to get out of that. So if I go to docs, that will then give me the specific API documentation that we would open API actually created for us inside of the FastAPI, which is the greatest portion about FastAPI. So again, this is the home, which is where we just were. If we go to try it out, we should see exactly the same thing, which we do. All that good stuff here. If we go to students, we should, again, if we go to try it out, we should see the exact same information right here. So again, if we go back down, we see our students, the total students that we have inside the database as well. And then again, if we go and say, I want to try this out as well, I want to give the student ID of 1, execute that, and again, we got Alice. So far, so good. Everything inside of our database is currently working. Okay, so now again, for the sake of time, I'm going to bring over our next example, which will be a post example here. And this is going to allow us to add a new student to our database. This is a post request. So what that means is we're going to send data from our wherever. So what that means is we're going to send data across the wire, across the internet technically, because this would be hosted on a server, and then allow this to create, or tell the database, hey, create this student inside of our database. When we do that, what we would need to do is say, hey, I want to grab a new student. So we'll say, based on the length of our student database right now, add one more. Then we'll say name, student.name, student.age, student.grade. Again, that's all going to come from this guy up here. So this student attribute or parameter that would be passed inside of this function. Then from there, we'll grab or add to the database and grab the student DB and append to that and say, hey, create a new student for this database. Then once we do that, we'll return a message that will then say, hopefully, the student name has been successfully created, and then what that student actually, who was created by the API. So if we go ahead and save that. So now that we've done that, let's go ahead and reload our API, because we don't necessarily, at least the way that I set this up, doesn't have re, refresh or fast reloading. So we have to do that manually. Go back here and say now we have a student post route. So we didn't have that before. All we had were gets. If we go to student, and then if we say again, try it out, we want to give some specific information here. So I'll say John, who will be age of 17, and John will be inside of the 11th. Sure. Go ahead and hit execute. And if that came back successfully, which it looks like it did, got a 200 here, which is a good response. We now have student John added successfully. The ID will be 4. John is the name, age is 17, and grade is the 11th. Cool. Next up, we would want to be able to create or update this information inside of our database, and we'll tackle that next. Okay, so now that we have the ability to grab all the students that we have inside of our database, we have the ability to create a student inside the database so we can create and retrieve, so C and R. Now we want to be able to use the same data that we have inside the database, but this time we want to update a student. So to do that, we would again say app.put. So this is going to be a different verb or different HTTP verb that we have inside of our toolbox for this. And we want to say, give me all the students based on a student ID, or give me the students, or give me access to the students based on a student ID. And when we grab that student ID, we want to then say, based on an integer, so that student ID is going to be an integer, we want to say we want to change the student or the student based information that's inside of our database. So again, we're going to update existing student information. This is going to be a pull request. It modifies existing data. So again, stuff that's already inside of our database. So what we would need to provide would be the student ID in the URL, and then also the information that we want to send in a request body. So that would be this guy right up here. So this would technically be the request body we want to then send inside of our information when we say update this student. Again, we're going to cycle through, so a for loop inside of our existing student information. And then we're going to list that information or enumerate that information with the student database. And then from there, if we find the existing student that we are looking for based on the ID, which again is equal to the student ID, we'll say student or update, grab the information from our global variable called studentsDB based on the index that we said that we wanted, or the ID that we said that we wanted, and then update this information here. So either update the name, the ID, or I'm sorry, update the name, the age, or the grade. So again, let's say we're going back from 1 year to the next and say, hey, John just graduated or just got promoted to another grade, and we want to update their grade. Cool. So we can do that and then go right back into returning the information. So again, we'll say the student that we requested has now been successfully updated, and then which student that actually was. If we don't find a student that we're looking for, though, we will then return an error and say, hey, that's not found. Let's go and do something else. So again, I'm going to save this, and then I'm going to rerun this. And I'm sorry, I forgot to say that you could, I said that there was another way to do this, but I didn't show it. So, and the other way that we could do this is say uv run main.py. Okay. But technically the other way would be more ideal, because we can do something like this and say, hey, I want to create a certain amount of workers for my database, or for my API, and that will be workers 2 in this case. And that basically means that the API is going to run different Python threads or brains at the same time so that we can handle more load if we need to. In this case, because we don't necessarily need that right now, we can leave that off. But I just wanted to show you that that's a way to get that done. Okay. We'll go back. Oops. However, the only way that the uv run main.py is actually going to work is if we actually have this running at the bottom here. So in order to do that, we would want to say if name underscore equal main. Then what we want to do is say uvcorn dot run, which is why we needed to up or import that earlier. We'll call this, put this on another line and say simple main app. The host will be on 127.0.0.1. The port will be 8000 and reload will be equal to true. Okay. So if we wanted the reload, that's a way that we can actually get that to be available to us here. Again, if we go ahead and say uv run main, that should then, again, I gotta save, then forgot to do that. So let's go ahead and try this one more time. There we go. So because I didn't, not what I called my app, I think I called it main. Yeah. Main. There we go. So sorry about that. That came from my example from earlier. But now if we want to grab this guy and keep things up and running as we're making these changes, since we said we wanted to keep the reload true, we can go ahead and go back to our documentation, give this a refresh, and we should see the information that we were looking for here. So update existing student information. This will be a put request. If it modifies the existing data, we go ahead and say try it out. We then say, okay, I want to modify the student ID of 4. And I will then say I want to keep, technically I think I should be able to do this, to keep everything else the same. And then all I want is to update the grade. I'll just take this out and say, cool, let's go ahead and execute that. Let's see what happened. 422. So this is what I was hoping was going to happen. What this means, or what this basically says to the API, is that we have information that was correct in a sense, but it's not what FastAPI was actually looking for, based on the fact that we said that our data for students looks like this. And we said that, and yeah, that's what we said. We said that. But because we said that, now we have to explicitly say, at least in this example here, that, hey, we need all of this information to be here inside the body of this request. So I'll go ahead and see if I can go back here. And I'll say again, John, just to keep this settled, and 17 in this case, and then go ahead and hit grade. What that should then do is say, okay, cool, this should be good, 200. All right, awesome. But we don't have, or at least this says that we don't have a student ID of 4. Technically, because we do not. So inside of the code that we have right now, the student database currently only has ID 1, 2, and 3. So if we wanted to actually get real information, we would want to say, okay, what is student ID 3? So Charlie, let's say Charlie had a birthday, and Charlie is now, so Charlie is now 17 or 16, I think, because he's 15 before. And I think Charlie was in the 9th grade. So let's go ahead and say he's now in the 10th grade. Cool. Go ahead and say execute here. And that then again gives us a successful message. So we say message successful. Charlie has been updated successfully. Then we have student ID, name, age, and grade has all been created successfully. Again, this is not being saved inside the database at all. It's just being saved inside of technical memory. But if we wanted to, this is what we could do here. All right, so our last thing that we want to do in this case will be to delete the information from a database or from the database that we have technically inside of here. So let's go ahead and do that next. So I'll grab this endpoint and bring it on over here. That's going to be underneath the put, and we'll put that right underneath here. And we'll go ahead and copy that on over and talk about what this does. So again, we have the app.delete, which is our HTTP verb. We say based on the student's endpoint, we want to grab a specific student inside of this database, and then we want to delete that student based on this ID. So when we do that, all we need to do is provide the student ID to the URL. And then again, what we're going to do inside of this situation is loop through all the students that we currently have, get the student that we're looking for, and then go ahead and delete that, or in this case, pop it off of the student information inside of our database. And then here we'll say return the student has been deleted successfully and which student it actually was. If this doesn't work correctly, we're going to say, okay, hey, we don't have a student based on that student ID. Please grab another one or not found. Okay, so if we go ahead and save this, go back to our documentation, give it a reload. Now we should see one more area here, and we'll say students ID delete. If we want to say, again, try this out, we want to delete student number 3. We go ahead and hit execute, and we get the student that we were looking for, which in this case is Charlie, whose age is 15 and grade is 9th. That now has been deleted inside of our actual information. Of course, not actually, but in general, this is actually something that we could do inside of this particular example. Hopefully you enjoyed this. Hopefully you learned a lot about how to use or understand FastAPI. And until next time, y'all be smooth. Blurred out.